been about a week and a half now since Glenn Beck on his TV show did Mormons 101. Mormonism 101. And he doesn't usually talk about his religion on his radio or TV shows, but he felt compelled to do this show that he did because there are some surveys and polls where 18% of people say they would not vote for a Mormon for president. That's a lot of people. And so I was hoping to dispel some, help people to see that Mormons aren't freaks, that you should feel safe voting for one. He announced a show in advance and gave people an email address to email questions. And the format was him getting a question, him answering the question. Here's the way I would have answered the questions. I wrote them down, so I don't think I got them down in the same order that they were asked on the show, because I started the list from memory before I watched the show again to make sure I got every question that was asked of him. The first question was, are Mormons Christians? Yes, the real name of the church is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. In the back of the Book of Mormon, there's a topical guide. And Jesus Christ in the topical guide starts on page 174 and ends on 185. 11 pages of Jesus Christ in the Book of Mormon. 11 pages in the topical guide. And some Christians are, for them to call you a fellow Christian, you've got to have an enormous list of things that you believe. But we definitely believe in Jesus Christ. And one of the questions is, do we worship the same God that everyone else does? Of course we do. The way I look at it, everyone who's not a polytheist, Muslims, Christians, Jews, I even some of the other religions too, maybe, are worshiping the same God. Now, we believe different things about him, and some of those things are contradictory, and so we can't all be right, or we have contradictory beliefs. But there's one God that's in charge of the world, one God that created it, and so we're worshiping the same God. Check. And he was asked about temples. The question had some wording like what goes on in the temples, or where the secret things. We do have temples that are restricted to members in good standing, but you don't need to worry about if a Mormon became president of us doing having orgies in the temple, or using the temples as places to plot to take over the world. We worship God in the temples. We do baptisms for the dead, because baptism is a requirement for everybody, and God wants everybody saved. And so we do baptisms for everyone, and they're given a chance, their opportunity to accept it. It's not going to be forced on their spirit. That way some people who didn't get a chance to get baptized in this life can get the needed baptism. We do what we call the endowment, and one of the other questions that Glenn Beck was asked was about our unique underwear. The question used the term magic. Please don't call our underwear magic. When someone does that, I assume they're using the wording that they give them benefit of the doubt and assume they're using the wording that they've just been hearing, but some of the people who call our underwear magic are doing it to try to be rude to us. It's sacred, it's religious, and we start wearing our underwear after we have gone through the endowment ceremony in the temple, where we promise, make sacred covenants to be good. That's a good quick summary that doesn't give you so much detail that it would violate the sacredness of it. And Brigham Young explained that in the endowment we learn signs and tokens that we will show to angels after this life, after we are dead and resurrected, to get into heaven. We're going to learn things that we're going to use then. Nothing now about plotting to take over the world or learning our position in some secret militia or secret government that will happen when we've taken over the world. And in our temples we have marriages that don't end at death. Now some people are disturbed by that, and some people who don't believe there's going to be any marriage in heaven at all. If you don't think there's going to be marriage in heaven at all, then you shouldn't be mad about people who think that, trying to make sure that they're still married there. But you should feel safe voting for Mitt Romney. He doesn't want to force anyone to go into the temple. He's not going to and what somebody else thinks heaven is going to be like is a really stupid criteria for whether you're going to vote for them or not. One of the questions Glenn Beck was asked was about polygamy. And this is one of the ones that I would have answered a little differently. Were Mormons polygamists in the past? Yes, in the past. And when we did do polygamy, there were no forced marriages, no little child brides, none of the horror stories that you see now from some modern polygamists. And we don't do it now. We haven't done it since 1890. If Mitt Romney wins the election, you're not going to suddenly have a next-door neighbor kidnapping your 12-year-old daughter and forcing him to marry you. At least with the government's approval, the government will go after him and punish him for doing that if that happened. Why did we do polygamy? God told us to. He didn't give a lot of details. We do know from the scriptures that when God does tell us to do polygamy, it is so that there is procreation going on. It's not just so the husband gets a lot of pleasure or some other reason like that. And one of the questions was something like, why did you not allow blacks into the church? And that question was written by somebody who didn't know the truth. Everybody of every race has always been welcomed into our church to be a member, to get into the best heaven. Now there was a time after the founding, Joseph Smith, the founder, ordained some black men until 1978, when people who were black were not allowed to hold the priesthood and not allowed in the temples. One way of looking at that you probably haven't heard somebody say is, we were making it easier for them to get into heaven. Because every person of all races is a spirit, daughter, and son of God. Daughter or son. You're one or the other. You're not both. And God's plan of salvation makes salvation possible for every single person born onto the earth. Everyone. And nobody is going to be punished for for not doing what they could not do. So those who were black, who accepted Jesus Christ by becoming a member of his church before 1978 and were faithful, endured to the end, they will be in the best heaven. They will be God's. Without holding the priesthood and going through the temple like my ancestors needed to do. It would be crazy for for decades before the ban was lifted, the prophets were saying it's going to happen, just not yet. Why did we do that? God never told us. There were some Mormons, even some Mormons in leadership, who took guesses, and some of those guesses were very wrong. So in a fairly recent general conference, the current living apostle Dallin H. Oaks hinted at one of those guesses about why blacks were not allowed to hold the priesthood, and said that's why we should not try to guess why if the Lord hasn't told us why. But Mitt Romney's father went on civil rights marches back in the 1960s, and Mitt Romney agreed with his father. So no one should vote against Mitt Romney because of those things. It wouldn't make sense to vote against someone who went on civil rights marches, who pulled his car over and wept when he first heard of the 1978 revelation. One of the questions asked to Glenn Beck was, how long can you not pay tithing before they do something to you? And nothing happens. Nothing happens. The way we pay tithing is, outside of the bishop's office, there's a rack with an envelope and a tithing slip. And here's what the tithing slip looks like. You write on the tithing slip how much you're giving. If you want it earmarked to a certain cause, tithing, fast offering, general fund, Book of Mormon, missionary, and whether you're paying check, cash, coins, how much of which. Then you give the envelope to your bishop. No one knows if you gave tithing or not. No one sees you. I suppose there might be some Mormons who try to give it to the bishop when there are people around. I give it to him whenever I see him. I don't try to be seen doing it. There are two people that count the money, and at the end of the year, the bishop looks at a summary of all the donations you've made, and you tell him whether you paid full tithing or not, if you paid all that you were supposed to pay or not. And I've never heard of anyone being investigated to make sure they were really paying everything they were supposed to. and you sign a paper. I guess that's in case you wrote a check that got lost in the system somehow, and that could be tracked down. That's how we pay our tithing. That's how we pay our own money to the church. Don't be scared to elect a Mormon for anything. He's not going to throw your tax money at the church. He's not going to give the church government money. And Glenn Beck was asked, what about caffeine? Something about caffeine. I wrote one sentence, one word summaries of the questions. Going by some memory triggered by one word. This is one thing that Brian Williams got wrong on Rock Central, or whatever that show was called. That's not worthy to be called a news magazine. With the after some of the stuff they've put out and the very inaccurate show they did recently that seemed to go out of its way to find our antagonist and disgruntled Mormons and accuse us of still dealing with things that we are not dealing with, that we don't do. How can a group be dealing with something that they don't do? Remember, about polygamy, I forgot to say, if somebody is an actual member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints practicing polygamy and they're caught, they're excommunicated. And one of my co-workers who watched Big Love when the first season of it, as far as I can tell from talking to that co-worker, they accurately represented that. My co-worker said that the family on Big Love, the HBO drama, were polygamists. Of course, if you didn't know that, you've been living under a rock for a few decades. They were polygamists, but from watching the show, it sounds to me like what he told me, they were in hiding. They were trying to hide that they were polygamists so that they wouldn't be excommunicated from the church. But Brian Williams in that TV show said we don't drink caffeine. Caffeine is not on the Lord's do not drink list. It's coffee and tea. Why? God told us, and He promised us some blessings, but He didn't give a really detailed list of every single ailment, symptom that we'll have if we become coffee and tea drinkers. But there is a verse in the scriptures where the Lord told us He never has given a promise, a commandment, which was temporal. Every commandment God has given has had spiritual motivations, blessings, reasons. So the reason for God telling us not to drink coffee and tea might be entirely spiritual, and not because our bodies will suddenly fall apart with coffee and tea. In 1833 is when God first gave the revelation. In that revelation, God forbade alcohol. He forbade drinking alcohol. He let us know that all alcohol is rubbing alcohol. Forbade tobacco. He did say you could use it on bruises. And back when I was 12 or 13, one of my Boy Scout leaders said when he played football for BYU, they would put some kind of a tobacco concoction on the tops of bruises. And for cattle, so when your cow or sheep gets sick, depending on what the sickness is, that's the proper use of tobacco. And that revelation doesn't say coffee, tea. It says hot drinks, which later prophets clarified to mean coffee and tea. Now, some Mormons do try to completely cut caffeine out of their life. Some try to live the low caffeine lifestyle. I live the low caffeine lifestyle. I drink caffeinated drinks, caffeinated sodas, when that's the only thing available in the house and I'm desperately thirsty. When I have a cold, when I'm fighting off a cold or flu, and I'm pushing myself to go to work anyway. Those are the times when I try to drink caffeinated drinks. I eat chocolate, there's caffeine in that. But caffeine is not on the prohibited list. What do we do to caffeine drinkers, coffee drinkers who are Mormon? That's one of the criteria to be temple worthy, is not drinking alcohol, coffee, tea, smoking tobacco, or chewing it also. And one other thing about the temples, to be worthy to go into the temples, I talked about tithing earlier, tithing, you have to be paying a full tithe to be able to go into our temples. And let's see, one of the other questions was, what about those missionaries? One of the most famous, most commonly known icons of the church is our missionaries, 19, 20-year-old guys dressed up in their white shirt with a tie. When the weather is cold enough, a suit, riding a bicycle. Our missionaries, we send them out into the world because we want you in heaven with us. If a Mormon wins the presidency, you will not be forced to listen to the missionaries. The missionaries will not be provided government housing. It would be stupid to base your vote on the missionaries. The missionaries are out there trying to teach people the gospel. Hopefully a lot of people will join the church, so there will be a lot of people in heaven with us. But the missionaries, there are women missionaries and old missionaries too. I did that. I'm more than a decade past missionary age now. The young men leave as early as 19 years old, and there's a cutoff where you're too old to do it. It used to be 27, if I remember hearing right. I'm not real sure about that because I went right away when I was 19. I didn't get close to the cutoff age. And they go for 2 years. The women can go as early as the age of 21 and go for 18 months. And married couples who are past retirement years, past childbearing years, can also do that. The senior couples have a lot more flexibility in going for a short 6-month mission if their circumstances in their life won't let them go for longer than that. In fact, the missionaries where I'm serving at right now, where I'm living right now, the senior couple missionary that's in my branch right now, they're doing a 6-month one. And the missionaries, for these 2 years, they don't go to school. Their recreational activities are limited to 1 day a week, not contact sports. You don't get to play tackle football. And in that 1 day of the week that you get to have fun, you're supposed to get your laundry done, get your letter writing done, get your shopping done. So the rest of the week, you can full-time be spreading the gospel. And in between spreading the gospel, the missionaries also do service projects. Find an old person's yard to clean up. I did some teaching of reading at a drug rehabilitation center when I was a missionary. Let's see, I mentioned no schooling, the limited recreation. The full-time missionaries do not date. They have to be single. They can't be owing child support payments to be allowed to go on a full-time mission. And they aren't working. They should have been trying to work and save money up to pay for their mission. If they tried but they weren't successful, they didn't save enough money, their family might help them. They might get some help from the church that just pays for their necessities and doesn't make them rich. My parents helped pay for my mission, and that's what the missionaries do. And my little brother, who I'm proud of, is on a mission right now in the Tulsa, Oklahoma mission. Speaking Spanish there. Let's see. And when Beck was asked, why do Mormons get married so young? I haven't seen a survey that, conclusive survey that showed the average age of marrying, but as far as I can tell, yeah, we do get married younger than other people, generally speaking. There are people who end up never getting married or not getting married until they're very old. Some of them are rather famous. Steve Young, the football player, direct descendant of Brigham Young, the second president of the church. He was single when the 60 Minutes did a show about us. It's been over a decade since that happened. And on the show, he quoted his ancestor, Brigham Young, saying, "A 35-year-old man who is single is a menace to society." But to the best of my knowledge, Steve Young hasn't lost his testimony because his great-great-great, I forget how many greats it is, grandpa, accused him of being a menace to society. Why would we get married so much younger than society in general? One thing that might affect that is we believe that marriage is vitally important. How important? See the question about temples. Well, this is a video, so I'll just rehash a little bit. We get married in a temple, and it doesn't end. And that's God's long-term plan for us. Getting that marriage that doesn't end, and we will still be married in the best heaven, which we call the celestial kingdom. And there are 3 divisions in the celestial kingdom. The best of those areas is the married section. God didn't specify to us what the other 2 are. So we look at it as important because of that. And if somebody doesn't get married in this life because they didn't want to, remember, we believe we won't be punished for what we wanted to do but could not do. So someone who really did want to get married and just had bad luck, or they did get married and then their marriage fell apart, their spouse decided they want a divorce, and they're old and die having never remarried, those people will be given an opportunity. So there's going to be a point in time where there will be no more marrying, no more new marriages, no more marrying and given in marriage. Before that point in time is reached, everyone that sincerely wanted and desired a marriage desired an eternal marriage, not people that just wanted to get married for this earth life. But those who really want an eternal marriage will be given that opportunity. I've never read a quote from the prophet that tells us exactly how that's going to work out. If God's going to pick your spouse for you if you get to that point and you're single, or if there's going to be some freedom of choice or some intermingling, if God's going to shove you into a room with all the other people that fit that description and say, there you go, find someone and come back to me. We'll see. But we want to get married. We probably get married younger than the rest of society because we look at that. We don't want to die single because we had opportunities to get married that we didn't take. And we're a religion that believes in my computer might be freezing on me. Computer, work right. Okay. We're a religion that believes that it's a serious sin to have sex outside of marriage. That will earn you a spot in hell if you don't repent of it. So someone who follows the religion's teachings doesn't get to have sex till they get married, and so we don't get to find out about that pleasurable experience till we're married. So that's one possible motivation that would lead us to get married younger than other people who don't care about whether they're married or not if they have sex, and you know, get their sex before they get married. And alrighty, one other question that I'm going to answer to that Glenn Beck was asked was, are there liberal Mormons? Yeah, this was asked to a conservative talk show host. So that's part of the reason for the question, probably. I do personally tend to lean conservatively on my political views. The church is politically neutral. The church does not officially name a party that is the good party or bad party or endorsed by the church, or the church does not specifically name candidates until our members vote for this candidate or that candidate. And on a lot of issues, the church is, on some issues at least, that other churches have come out with statements, we've said nothing. No, the church has said nothing. The church has no official position on stem cell research, for example, embryonic stem cell research. So someone could be a member of the church, vote anyway. The church has, on rare occasions, come out in favor of talking about a principle, and sometimes that principle has been on the ballot. Proposition 8 was not a political party or a candidate. That was a principle that the church came right out and endorsed, Proposition 8 in California. So someone can be a member of any political party, don't get kicked out of the church. Someone can vote any way. Somebody wouldn't have been excommunicated probably if they voted for Proposition 8. I mean, voted against. The church said vote for. I voted against Proposition 8. So you go to a Mormon church, and you might find a liberal there, and you might find that some congregations where there are more liberal Mormons than conservative Mormons. So there are Mormons that are screwed up in the head like that. Did I say that? There are Mormons who are liberals. The one question that was asked to Glenn Beck, that was because it was Glenn Beck, is, you seem to be a rule breaker. Why would you be a part of such a rigid church? So, those are all the questions. Here's my summary. There are 18% of people in some surveys that said they wouldn't vote for a Mormon. Now, some of you 18%, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. Maybe some of those 18%, my eyes were just following a fly there. I wasn't hallucinating, I'm telling you, in case my camera's doesn't have enough pixels, enough megabytes to give you that detail to see the fly that just flew in front of my face and is now in my hair. Let's see. Some of you 18% may have been thinking of one specific person, and you really would be willing to vote for a Mormon. But at the moment you were asked, you thought of one specific Mormon and really answered the question, would you vote for this one specific person? To the rest of you, you really shouldn't be scared. You shouldn't have a phobia, because it is a phobia. There's no reason for you to not vote for a Mormon. We're not going to steal your children. We're not going to force our beliefs on you. We don't do child forced marriages. We don't do crazy animal torture in our temples or any of those things that, if we did do them, I would say, yeah, don't vote for someone who does that. Don't vote for Warren Jeffs for president. But we're not Warren Jeffs. Let's see. And if you're somebody who's not planning on voting for Mitt Romney because of some other reason other than him being a Mormon, if you want to vote against Mitt Romney because you like death panels deciding that old people need to be allowed to die instead of being given costly medical care, then don't vote for Mitt Romney. If you don't want to vote for Mitt Romney because you're against our Second Amendment rights and self-defense, and you want to be able to break into my house and kill me without me being able to defend myself, well, then I guess Mitt Romney is not your candidate. But otherwise, if you really are even a moderate, let's realize we have bigger fish to fry than our little differences about what we think heaven will be like in the future, or whether somebody does or doesn't drink certain things, as long as they aren't trying to force that on you. And I use that term if you're a moderate, because there's nothing moderate about Barack Hussein Obama. And the moderate thing is to have some kind of stop on the federal government power. There's nothing moderate about let the government do anything it wants, federal government do anything it wants. That's not moderate. Moderate is give the government some powers and give it those powers, and don't contradict those powers. But, you know, have some limits on it, so the states have some things that only the states do. In case you can't tell from this, I do plan to vote for Mitt Romney in November. Thank you for watching this. Have a good day.